Since we are running out of time, we will now have a short discussion, and after that, the audience can ask more questions. So I have a question regarding the response to the Ukrainian crisis. We saw a lot of volunteers, civil society, really responding to the crisis in a very significant way. So do you have any suggestions to the various bodies, NGOs, governments, anyone that is a practitioner or politician in that field in how to engage the civil society more efficiently?
Well, I can maybe start, and I hope that the others will continue. But I think migration generally, and specifically integration in this type of situation, is a whole of society approach. And so definitely it needs all the stakeholders, starting with the migrants themselves, and starting with diasporas who have a lot of knowledge, who have a lot of strength, and building up on that. And yes, it's important for governments to sort of take their role and have the overall responsibility and coordination role. It's equally important to bring in all the other actors and stakeholders who have different expertise, different access maybe also to affected populations, like in this case Ukrainian refugees, and to really work together cohesively. And I think from emergency response and coordination mechanisms in emergencies, you could take quite a lot of things and see whether it would be interesting to apply them also more broadly to things like integration and how to sort of coordinate and work together, not only on early inclusion but also on longer term integration.
Yeah, I would like to say that there are two major things. The first one is that the especially local structures should rely on the existing structures that are inside the society. It means that there are many diaspora groups that are already well organized and existent in this sense, and that the case, even if that was Ukrainian refugee or a Palestinian refugee, it doesn't mean that the former Bosnian refugee already integrated in the society cannot help. So that already existent questions and key lessons that we passed should really lead us in this case. The second thing is the communication, that it really matters here, and it demands of all of the structures to communicate. And I already said that it's not anymore only two-way communication street, but it's a circular one where government especially need to circularly communicate with the migrant groups to integrate them as well, not only in the integration programs, but also in the creation of integration policies, and to take the feedback in account, not only when they draft the integration policies, but every day of their, especially a receiving phase in the society.
Well, in Sweden, I think you saw in some of the PowerPoints, we haven't had a high influx of Ukrainian refugees, but we had a high influx of refugees in 2015, and a very big response from the NGOs and the civil societies in that situation. And what we have learned from that is that we had a lot of ephemeral organizations and a lot of ephemeral organizing that started up and come together. But due time and over time, the larger ones have more strength to remain, and also they have more local structures to hang up to and to remain. But both national funding and local funding try to engage and put funding to these collaborative structures that evolved during the 2015 and 16 situation. But when we're looking back now, since it was short time funding, and a lot of the funding was in projects, they tend to disappear. And some projects come up again with new funding and the same topic and a new target group, but a lot of them disappeared. And we haven't seen that same plethora of projects or collaboration structures regarding the Ukrainian. I don't know if it's because we don't have as many Ukrainians, or if it's because the past structures that started in 2015 and 16 has been able to direct their targets.
Yeah, I can only witness the strong response of No, I wouldn't define it only Ukrainian diaspora, but Ukraine concerned population, because I'm Armenian and my mattress, inflating one, was not deflated for a couple of months, because every time somebody would land and in a common chat of people who were working as an interpreter at Milan train station, we were all ready to receive somebody. So I'm not Ukrainian at all, but let's say that we mobilized ourselves into some power that at regional level could direct, help, and intervene when the government were not present there 24 hours. Or, I mean, of course, we should make sure that the governments do not push the integration and response measures towards diaspora, but we shouldn't underestimate how powerful can be the diaspora response and help. And I think that it is important that there is a lasting response, but it should be structured by those who know how to organize it. So I think that this should come from community, from city level, from somebody who can maintain the speed of response beyond the very hype of the wave. And one way to deal with that is to organize some coaching between the experienced migrants and the newcomers. Because even if you are high-skilled, even if there is a governmental response to your needs, not always this is enough to navigate complex bureaucratic systems. And in those cases, most of information is coming from your peers. And it would be useful to, in some way, to have initiatives where you can be paired with somebody to sustain you and help you to navigate through the very new reality that you are facing for unknown period. So I think that can be a lasting role of the diaspora.
Yes, thank you. Kemal, you mentioned this comprehensive process. I think you meant like a holistic approach to integration. What do you think, who should lead the process of engaging the civil society into the integration processes?
I would like to say that the ones that are paid to do the job for the society should always get the responsibility in coordination. What Sonia said, it's one very good point that the integration process should not be put in front of the diaspora structure, but should include them equally in the process. The responsibilities of the governments is not only to lead or to coordinate, but also to communicate, to see a rule about what is needed on the field and who can help how. It is really important that we have the clear integration paths, not only the clear integration programs, but also to include the civil society, to also include the educational, the business structures as well. We are very lacking the dialogue with the business sector about the integration. A lot of criticism has been put upon not including the business structures, not talking about the economic factors of the integration, but how can we accelerate the integration career? How can we accelerate the careers of the already integrated persons in the economic sphere? It is really important to open up a dialogue also about the topic once when the refugees is integrated in the business structures, how can he or she advance its career inside of it? And in that case, the coordination from the side of the government should not only include the civil society organizations, but also the intergovernmental organizations. The case of Bosnian diaspora showed us why is it important to include the religious structures as well in the integration process and other social forms as well.
Thank you. Any more thoughts or ideas? Not at the moment. We will take some questions from the audience. Once again. No, nothing. Therefore, I have a next question. What do you think? How can technology be leveraged in response to such situations as the Ukrainian refugee crisis or in general to do with migration integration? how can we best use technology to our advantage to gather data about migrants, help them integrate?
I can start. Yeah, it's by coincidence, yesterday flying from Milan airport, Linate, there was a huge banner that was saying in Italian, we took off with a big fancy plane on it. We took off, but do we know the pilot? And it was about artificial intelligence. So we are living in a period where artificial intelligence advances at a high speed, but with algorithms that are little known. I think that it would be hard to stop any technological progress, and we have to accept it. However, we have to know what is beyond. And I have mentioned in my presentation, any kind of huge pressure from humanitarian migrants is unsustainable for public employment services, which have only limited resources put in place. And I think that artificial intelligence, to some extent, can help us to profile migrants and to match them with maybe companies, with understanding their training needs, despite the language barriers, because we know that artificial intelligence almost removed that barrier. Anybody speak in a video in any language. So I think that we have to make a better use of what technology is using, because I think that when it comes to implementation of policies on integration, we are a bit orthodox. We just rely on all the methods, and we don't dare to go ahead. And there is a reason why, because of the algorithm, because of data treatment, we are not very sure how it goes. But perhaps this is one of the areas, with one of the domains that requires pan-European response, not at member state, but at the European Commission, European Union level response. I think that there are attempts. There is a center of, I think, algorithmic transparency or something created in Sevilla. And there is a way to go ahead with this and to be sure that we are not harming and we are not creating some profiling of our residents. But we have to look forward on applying this kind of technologies in the integration process. We have already some initiatives by International Labour Organization, how to use, for example, LinkedIn platform in order to better understand the labor supply by those who are, of course, posting it there. And while we are in the experimental phase of all this, we should be looking forward to make the best of it, of course, minding all the data protection and other ethics concerns. And I think that the future is there. I think we are going further and further from the moment we need to go to meet on an appointment public employment service officer to recommend a job to us. We are already by ourselves finding through platforms, etc. And I think that we should be looking forward to using it.
I think also it's very important to remember that who sets up these kind of platforms and ideas and initiatives and who takes part in them. For example, during COVID, we could see in integration initiatives that some people move their Swedish for Immigrants, for example, training to Zoom or to other platforms. And it worked very well for some target groups who were used to using technology, but for other target groups, it becomes an extra barrier for them in the integration process. Now they were not just only starting to learn Swedish, they were also starting to learn and maybe even not even having the kind of technology that we asked them to have in regards to taking part of integration. But we also see successful initiatives, for example, during COVID, when we had, for example, social media platforms were used to provide information in mother tongue languages that we know are usually spoken in Sweden regarding information during COVID or various things for people who are not yet integrated so they can connect with the Swedish language and have their information correctly. So we see both, but I think it's very important to keep in mind that even these ideas, when we have them, when they come into practice, they work for some and maybe not for others, and it depends a lot of context.
I would like to add actually that the program of coding is always the same. So what it tells us that it presents a really huge opportunity also for the integration in connection to the IT skills, what could be done. We have a lot of young generations now that are not only skilled but pro with different IT skills, with different online platforms, and it does not only present for us as someone who is in the development the opportunity to reach out to hard to reach out groups, but also it's opportunity for governments to accelerate the integration in that sense, meaning to connect the education opportunities as well, but also the business opportunities as well in terms of the IT skills that refugees are possessing in a huge level.
Yeah, and maybe to add to everything that you said, Sonia, you mentioned basically forecasting as one of the things. In your presentation, you were talking about using social media to predict where are people likely going to be moving to. And this is really powerful if you think about preparing local communities for increased diversity and inclusion. If you use these tools positively to actually predict where are people going to be and how do we start preparing for an increase in Ukrainian refugees with IT skills in Dublin, you can already sort of hit the ground running and really start setting up good mechanisms. So you can really harness the power of this kind of data in a very positive way in terms of forecasting, both generally on migration, but also on specific things like integration. And then, of course, I mean, this is not something that one of you has mentioned because it's probably so profane, but if we look at the power of applications that we already have to at least initiate an initial conversation with somebody who turns up, and you need to find out who are they, what do they need, are there any specific vulnerabilities? There are quite a lot of language apps that actually allow you to have that first conversation and already sort of try and refer people into different pathways that they would need for support or for further inclusion. So I think there's a lot that technology can do. We need to embrace it. We need to be mindful that all of these algorithms do have inherent discrimination patterns within them, so we need to improve those as we go along as well, and not solely rely on those, but I think they can be really good, helpful tools to support integration.
If I may add, there is already some positive experience years ago already in Switzerland, I think, where they tried to match the profiles of the potential humanitarian migrants to the job opportunities or place in Switzerland. And they did that experiment. They did for a group similar matching, and the other one more manual based on the public employment service traditional matching technique. And the algorithmic one was superior compared to the one based on simple traditional matching, because it's more powerful in understanding where the positive impact can be. But again, that's what the reason that the transparency of these algorithms and the fact that it shouldn't discriminate against some groups should be clear, and for the reason that we are living in a common space, digital space, and that's why I think that this is a domain where the European Union should step up together, so not to create some heavens where things can be done not in line with the moral and our values of the society.
Okay, thank you. I would like to give the word to the audience. Any questions, comments? Nothing. We are living in the time of crisis. COVID, now the Ukrainian crisis, seeing what's happening in the world. I believe countries are all thinking about the preparedness of the future. Do you have any final thoughts or tips, strategies to share with the audience today?
It's a question that you can't not answer to, but it's so broad that it's really, really, really difficult to give a very precise answer. But generally, I think we live in a world where migration and diversity is a given. And so irrespective of whether you're expecting or faced with an increase of migrants, I think it's definitely good to prepare for increased diversity and inclusion. And it's also something at an international but also at a European level that we've committed to through global frameworks like the Sustainable Development Goals, through non-binding legal frameworks like the Global Compact on Safe, Orderly and Regular Migration, where there are quite a lot of objectives that states can choose to implement or not, which relate to things like inclusion. And I think irrespective of whether we are in a particular crisis mode at the moment or not, one of the things that we know is that the next thing is preparedness anyway. And so I think it would be really important in a global world with diverse societies to work on integration.
Work on prevention.
Yes, and prevention, but also on preparedness, I think.
Yeah, I would like to say that first of all, I would like us all to understand that the migrations are in our nature, and today, not only due to the war circumstances, it's the most democratic right to vote by your feet, right? If you don't like the place A, you go to place B. If you don't like the place B, you go somewhere else. And it's totally normal that the people will migrate. Today, tomorrow, always. And that is someone who we are. That's why I called it also the people on the move, the presentation, and it will stay like that. And the beauty of migration is also the beauty of today's world, not the bad happenings that are there, but also a lot of beautiful ones, the society, the united in diversity, as we like to say in Europe. And the second one is that integration is really like driving a bicycle, and that the further you will drive, the further you will go. But the question for all of us here today is some food for thought that I would like to leave is how do we on an individual level contribute to the integration, not only in our countries, but worldwide as well.
I will give maybe some feedback to the policymakers, because I think we have a lot of great ideas in the policy level, but as we can see more and more that when come into practice they do have effects, and crises tend us to create a lot of new policies to face and react to the crisis we have at hand. No matter what crisis, it creates shifts and changes, and sometimes they will have very short-term effects and sometimes they will have really long-term effects, but we do keep in mind that the policy that we create will also become something else in practice sometimes, with intended and unintended consequences. So that we keep in mind that the policy formulation, the effects of the policy formulation can happen in practice, and we don't always know which turn it will take, for example, with demands of language skills or validation. And crisis has this inspiring effect of us in policy changes, but they can have both short and long-term effects.
Yeah, I think that in 2022 we were more prepared to receive this huge flow of migrants, humanitarian one, because we put a lot of things in place in 2015-16. Because in 2015-16 we already realized that not integration has a huge cost on our societies. So I think that there is a progress. Of course, we are not happy that every time it's called crisis, well, it is repeating with frequency that shouldn't be called crisis anymore. However, I think we are more prepared. And I would just refer to what was told by President von der Leyen in 2022 speech of State of the Union, that the extent to which EU was able to provide support to Ukrainian humanitarian displaced population is a lesson to be learned and maybe applied in other contexts too. So we realized that more open approach, more positive approach towards integration, the population that is already in your territory only benefits the society. We have to put an effort to integrate. Given also the depopulating situation of Europe, aging population, we should be happy of people choosing Europe versus other destinations, because we have to keep in mind that we are also losing attractiveness to other destinations like Gulf, like Canada, like United States, like Australia, who have more active policies of recruiting the best and the brightest and the talented. So we have to put an effort to make sure people who come to Europe become part of the society and can contribute from the very beginning. And I would also like to speak about the elephant in the room that we didn't talk about migration in general. And we know that all the history of human migration was perhaps, at least from when even not documented, was not only due to discoveries and populating and conquering new area, but also climatic change. And this is something that will be affecting many areas which are going to have the biggest population, that is the Southern Mediterranean, Africa, and Asia. And we know that these are also regions that will be hit the most by the climate change. So areas that are having highest population growth will be the ones that are facing also consequences of climate change. Are we ready for the all population displacement through the conflict, through all displacement that will be happening, to have them moving across countries? This is unavoidable, and we maybe should think how we are prepared for something with certainty coming in the future. So that is climate migration, and I think IOM would agree with that.
I would add that we have to be mindful in this discussion that most of this migration will still happen within the region, and those that are going to be most vulnerable are the ones who don't have the opportunity to move. So we need to be mindful of that. But within that, yes, we'll see migration, and migration is also an important adaptation strategy to shocks and impacts like sudden onset climate change-related disasters, for example.
So finally, I just want to say a big thank you to you panelists for coming to Tallinn, attending our conference, sharing our expertise. There is really a lot of information, a lot of things to think about here. Very, very useful to everyone, to me and to everyone in the audience, I believe. So thank you.